Good evening, gospel revolutionaries around the world. This is Michael Lilborn Williams coming to you from the bonus room above my sister's garage in the Secret City. Thank you for joining me tonight. We're doing Colossians, but as many of you know, I am preparing really kind of as we speak. I'm kind of on the run, getting ready for my flight to Canada tomorrow. My brother, as always, is so gracious to pick me up at 4:30 in the morning. To get out of Tennessee, you got to get up early. So he's coming and picking me up at 4:30 in the morning. We'll get to the airport. I fly out at 6:30. My flight gets in because of the 2-hour time setback that I do. I cross 2 time zones into Mountain Time, and that gains me a couple of hours for sure. And then I'll be in Calgary sometime in the early afternoon. Let me adjust this just a little bit. It looks just a little off. Anyway, maybe it's just me. So I'm really kind of stoked about Calgary. Beyond Belief, the sequel. So be sure we're going to be broadcasting live Facebook and also YouTube this time. So we are broadcasting live on YouTube. We've had some complications, learning curve of trying to get Facebook onto YouTube, and they just don't work together. So we're going to be broadcasting on both, and therefore the conference will be available on YouTube and also on our Facebook page. So thank you guys for joining us. And those of you that have already come in, we appreciate it. I'm trying my best to stay away from our topic that I'm going to be on in Calgary. So I'm going to skip forward here because part of my text that I'm going to be using to go into Beyond Belief is actually going to be found in chapter 1. Don some really wonderful things the last time we were doing research in the book of Colossians. And if you're not getting those shows, please listen to our show that's published every Friday. All you have to do is go on and sign up for the newsletter. The show will be delivered to your mail, to your inbox every Friday, and you'll be able to listen to it. This will also be delivered to you. This show will also be delivered to you just in case you happen to miss it live. So, and either way, it's nice to have it on hand. You might want to share it with somebody else. So, to kind of stay away from the wonderful things that I'm wanting to share up in Calgary, I've got to keep my powder dry a little bit here. I'm going to jump forward to Colossians chapter 2, verse 8. And Colossians 2, verse 8 gives us another glance into Paul's really grave concerns about what is happening at that time in the world concerning the gospel. And he really was concerned about where the disciples were taking things, the emphasis they were putting on it. There is a very clear difference when you look at the difference between Paul's teaching and Peter, James, and John. Paul taught that all judgment had been done away with, sin had been done away with, and righteousness had dawned upon the entire planet and to all people. The disciples taught that sin was still alive, judgment was still here and coming in the future, and also that righteousness was something you had to obey the law to have. I can't make it more simple than that. They disagreed on those 3 points. Interestingly enough, those are the 3 points that Jesus said the Holy Ghost came to teach us about: sin, righteousness, and judgment. And he tells us what he would be teaching on it pertaining to sin, righteousness, and judgment. It just so happens that Jesus agrees with Paul. But I guess in the final analysis of it all, Paul was agreeing with Jesus that sin had been done away with. The Holy Ghost knows that. Righteousness is not something to be attained. It is a gift from God to the whole planet. Oh man, I tell you, that just satiates my soul, my mind, to stop and think about righteousness being imparted to the whole earth. The prophets even said that righteousness would flood the earth as the waters cover the sea. They were searching for words to explain how profound this new way and this new thing that was going to happen, that it would literally saturate and cover the entire planet. God's righteousness would. And the issue of judgment. And we went through that in our last teaching about the peace of God, about being at peace with God. It's the most powerful thing you will ever learn, is that God is not angry with you or anybody else, and he's not going to be. To say that God is angry is to insult the work of the Christ, the work of the cross and Christ. To say that sin still exists at all is to insult the cross and the work of Christ. To say that righteousness is something that you have to work for or earn is to insult the grace of God, the cross, and Christ. All three of those things, Paul said that the way the disciples taught on them insulted the grace of God, and they insulted the grace of God over and over again, which proved Paul's point, because God didn't judge them for teaching those things in that manner. Oh my goodness. Well, they came into this blinded, and it seems as though that even when the veil was rent, that somehow the disciples didn't get the memo somehow. I don't know what happened, but I know that a struggle for leadership, a struggle for power, obviously happened by James coming and taking over the church, who had nothing to do with the work of Christ at all. He just took over. There was no appointment, nothing that we even teach now that validates that somebody is called of God whatsoever, that is taught within the church. James didn't have any of those credentials that are taught by the church today. So here we have James, this person out of time, out of rhyme, out of sync, and Paul, as compared to where he was at, he was out of time, out of rhyme, out of sync also. But see, both of these guys could not be right in their declarations. They disagreed with each other. We read clearly in Philippians chapter 2, I believe it is, where Paul said, beware of dogs. Beware of the concision. Let's see. I don't want to leave you hanging here. That's in chapter 3, where he said, finally, my brethren, rejoice in the Lord. To write the same thing to you indeed to me is not grievous, but for you it is safe. Beware of dogs, beware of evil workers, beware of the concision. Now, the concision was those that were preaching circumcision. And Paul said, beware of these people. Now, he makes it very clear in the book of Galatians who it was that was preaching circumcision. It was Peter, James, and John. And Paul said, beware of this. Why? Because, a condition existed before the cross, and that is that everyone was blinded to the truth of the gospel before the cross, and everyone was in darkness. But see, now nobody is blinded to the gospel, and nobody is in darkness. You say, but Mike, how is it that some don't see? Because they deliberately put on what Paul described as the law of Moses, and it says that they put these blinders over their eyes and they can't see anymore. It's one thing to be blind and can't see. It's another thing to be in darkness and not be able to use the eyes that you have. But it's one other thing altogether to be in the light, to have perfect eyesight and deliberately put blinders on and just cover your eyes. And Paul described that's what the law of Moses does to someone now that the new covenant has been established. It can only blind you to the truth. If Moses' law has anything to do with your belief system, you're blinded. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. I was talking to a guy in the gym about this today. And the leaven is the law. And that's what Jesus was talking about. Just a little bit is all it takes. All it takes is one law, and the whole thing is polluted then. It's just not truth anymore. So here in Colossians chapter 2, verse 8, beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the traditions of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. So here again, Paul is saying, beware. Now, we can't help but think that since this is the second time he said beware, he's got the same subject on his mind here. And the way he addresses this is that there's people out there saying things that it's just vain deceit, and it's after the traditions of men. Now, I'm going to cheat just a little bit, as is my wont to do, and jump over to verse 18 and tell you just a little bit of what Paul was talking about. Now he's saying, now this verse 8 says, don't let anybody spoil you. But look at verse 18. Let no man beguile you of your reward in a voluntary humility and worshiping of angels, intruding into those things which he hath not seen, vainly puffed up by his fleshly mind. So, don't let anybody beguile you, telling you about all their spiritual experiences. And man, we've got people out there that, man, they've sat with angels and Moses and everybody else. But Paul is saying that these type of people, they have a beguiling power. Their testimony, if you will, can be very misleading. I had a misleading testimony for many, many years that hurt a lot of people. And I've had the great privilege of apologizing for that over the years. And we have it, established on our webpage, Facebook, all these places. But here Paul is warning against this again. And he said, after the rudiments of the world. And the word rudiments just simply means the principles or the rules. He says, don't let anybody beguile you with rules. That's if you just brought it right down to the most simple statements you can get out of this, looking at the Greek, don't let anybody beguile you. Don't let anybody spoil you through putting you under rules. That is what Paul's warning is. Stop with the rules already and not after Christ. You see, you're either after rules or you're after Christ. You can't have both. This intricate, delicate, finessed mingling of law and grace and Christ and rules is no mixture whatsoever. You can stir until your arms and legs break off and turn over to somebody else. You're never going to make oil and water mix. It just isn't going to happen. And this is what is the attempt that's been made through the doctrines of Christianity. All the denominations I know of mix law and grace together. The only thing we're presenting to you is that grace is grace apart from the law. The law is law. This law is law. Grace is grace, is grace is grace. And Paul said it almost exactly in those same terms. He said, because if the law is not without grace, it's no more law. And he said that 2 or 3 ways. And then he said, and grace can't be grace. If it has law, then it's no more grace. You can't have both of these things. And yet Sunday after Sunday, Wednesday after Wednesday, people hear these things married together in this false ceremony that takes place in trying to get people to accept something that is not true. He says, why should you stay away from the rules? For in him dwelleth all the fullness of the Godhead bodily. You don't need the rules. You say, well, Michael, you're just a rule breaker. You are too. We're all rule breakers. We all break the rules. And besides that, you don't even know what the rules are. There's 613 rules. There's 613 laws in the Old Testament. So when you start saying you live by the rules, don't say that, because you don't. You don't live by the rules. And then there's this intricate going in and trying to separate which rules are the ones you need to keep and which ones are you supposed to not keep. The law is completely married together in and of itself. You take one law out, the entire law falls apart. The law is built on linear logic. It's like a chain. If you take one link, I don't care if the chain is 1,000,000 miles long or a foot long. If you take one link out of a chain, does the chain even exist anymore? The chain is no longer valid. It is no longer has any power if one link is taken out of the chain. But you see, Jesus didn't just take a link out of the chain. He took all the links out of the chain. He nailed all the laws to his cross. He took them completely out of the way. Now, if Jesus took the law and he nailed it to his cross and took it out of the way, what does that mean? It means it was in the way. And if it was in the way before the cross, just think of how in the way it is after the cross. He says, for in him dwelleth all the fullness of the Godhead bodily, and you are complete in him. That's why you don't need any rules. You're already complete. Man, I'm telling you, that's like getting the prize and then looking for the rules to win the prize. Oh my goodness. I hope that this invokes the joy in you that I feel about this. I get so tickled at how ridiculous I was in trying so hard to keep the rules for the race that I'd already won. Because I won it in Christ. That's where I won. I didn't win by keeping the rules. This is the most powerful thing that the human race could ever hear, is that you have arrived and you are complete. You have completed all of this. This is all complete because you're in Christ and he's the one that fulfilled it all. And you are complete in him, which is the head of all principality and power. Now, to get that down in our today's language, principality is simply a rank, if you will, and a principality and a power would be like a jurisdiction. He is the head of all rank, and he is the head of all jurisdictions. He's the top dog, and he rules all jurisdictions. Now, when you get into church, you're going to find out Jesus is Lord over this. He's not Lord over that. He's got jurisdiction here. He doesn't have jurisdiction there. Oh, man, don't let anybody spoil you. Don't let anybody rob you. You guys, this is so powerful to understand the power of the gospel, and we appreciate you so very much. Danny Rogers is just thanking me for answering his question on the podcast last week. You're very welcome, Danny. I can't remember what the question was now, but we're glad that you keep up. And do send us questions. We've not been focusing on the questions a great deal here lately, but we are going to be trying to do that a little bit more. We just get so caught up in this wonderful synergy that's going on between Don and I, and we want to try to keep this all going. So thank you guys. I've gone over my time because I don't keep the rules. I love you so very much. We're going to be in Canada, and my brother's watching now. So Gary, I'll see you tomorrow morning at 4:30 in the morning. In fact, Lori said she'd be here by 20 minutes after, just to make sure. I told her my brother's always more than on time. She says, I'll get there at 20 after. And you guys, thanks so much. Love you. And we will do our best to be back here Tuesday night. My flight gets back Monday night, so I should have no problem being able to get back on here next Tuesday and give you an update on what happened in Canada before you ever get to hear the series. Now remember, you can tune in on Facebook and you can also tune in on YouTube. We're broadcasting live on both. We no longer have to try to figure out how to get Facebook material onto YouTube. We are going to be publishing live on both of these entities. Thank you so much. Love you. Good night.